Hi, welcome everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us today. I will add a note that Alan does have one of his key people, Eric Youngdale, also on this call. So if you have questions that he can help you with as well, he's also with us, even though he's not formally presenting today. But welcome, to our webinar. Before we get into all of the great things going on with MKS Toolkit and Nutcracker and X-server, just wanted to give you a little bit of flavor of what's going on at PTC here. COVID has hit us all. It's been a long haul, as you know, and although we're all very excited about the new vaccine starting to emerge, certainly one thing that has happened over the last year and will continue into the future is that it's forced us, all of us, to change how we do business. It's changed our personal lives. It's also changed our work lives. And so PTC has been very busy, and fortunately for us, we have the type of technologies that can really help companies and people do business differently, whether you're working from home or on the front lines where you can't work from home, but have to work differently in the field than in the past. And so, if you're interested to know more about how that's happening, you can go .ptc.com and /coronavirus and get more information. Tied to that, yesterday, the company announced that we are acquiring a company by the name of Arena. This follows up from a year ago, almost to the day, when we acquired a company called Onshape. And both of those companies are leading SaaS companies. And specifically PTC, you'll hear about more if you want to go to our Investor Day. If you go to Investor Relations about PTC on our website, if you go under Why PTC, Investor Relations, and then you'll see in there the Investor Day that just took place yesterday, where we announced the Arena acquisition. You'll see a lot of information about why we're doing this. It's a big investment by PTC, but we had a huge amount of success over the last year with our Onshape acquisition in the SaaS world. We're taking that up another notch now with the acquisition of Arena, and you'll see and get a good feel for how the whole COVID pandemic has forced us to change the way we do business and how we can now help more and more at PTC in how you're going to respond to those required changes. The one thing that we keep hearing over and over again, the vaccines are coming, the vaccines have started, they're here, that's great. Over the next 6 months, hopefully we'll all be in a much better place. But the effects of how we're doing business differently are not going to go back to the way they were before. You hear about the new normal. We are not going to go back to the old normal as a world and how we do business. So this certainly, helps you see how PTC is here for the long haul. If you layer that on top of the broad amounts of products that we have, and from our roots in CAD and MCAD and Windchill with product and lifecycle management, and then we expanded into IoT and augmented reality, and then you can see where we're SaaSifying the whole experience and bringing the digital and physical worlds together in a way that has never happened before, as a response to our new way of working together, in the middle of COVID and post the pandemic. We have a really broad AR base, geographical presence. PTC is a really broadly successful company, and we continue to be, even throughout the pandemic. We have a continuing growing ARR base. Our annual recurring revenue grew in our FY20, which ended, by the way, September 30th. It grew double digits, and we're continuing to project double-digit growth in our ARR going forward. Very profitable. We have free cash flows in great shape, and our capital situation is extremely good. So, feel good about working with PTC. You can see that some of you, I know, fall into some of these buckets in our vertical customer base. And you can see that we're heavily invested in industrial, federal, aerospace, defense, high-tech, automotive, and professional services, and medical devices as well. And so I know many of you are in these categories, and you know, this is a sweet spot for us here at PTC. The other thing that I thought might be worth mentioning is that the company, our company, has evolved to a really strong financial technology company, but we've also begun to really emerge as a really strong diversity sensitive company. You know, the Boston Globe, you know, we're based out of Boston and the Seaport District, and Boston has recognized PTC as really one of the top best places to work in Massachusetts in 2017, 18, 19, and we expect to be the same in 20 as well. A lot of recognition over the last 6 to 9 months on our inclusion and diversity efforts. We just hired an executive vice president of diversity and inclusion, and so we take it seriously, and we've had a lot of success here in the evolution of our workforce and the way we include people in how we're doing things in the company. Look, shareholder value, top line, bottom line, any way you want to look at it, the company's doing really well. You know, I'm not going to go through all the numbers here. I will just encourage you, if you have an interest or a question, feel free to go to the investor relations site. If you go through the investor day that we just had yesterday with a lot of our analysts and investors around the world, you'll get a really good feel for the strength of the company. You can see some of the comments here by some of those analysts as a result of our fiscal year-end earnings that we made in late October. Just more of the same good stuff. Despite acquiring all these new technologies and Internet of Things, augmented reality, you know, SaaS, and all the newest technologies that are emerging and disrupting the way people are used to using technology up until now. The one thing we are doing here that Alan and his team are going to talk about today is that we remain focused on you and what your issues are, and MKS Toolkit, Next Server, Nutcracker, and the products that you are relying on, the developer tools you're relying on to be successful. And we're focused there so that other parts of the company that get involved in some of these newer acquisitions or new technologies can't affect the customer service you get from this team. As a result, we created this Focused Solutions group and took the functions from around the company for these products and put them into one business unit that is protected. So we have best of both worlds, really. We can leverage some of these new cool technologies where it's appropriate, and we can protect the resources that are required to keep your product, your success in focus for us. So we're not distracted with people going off and working on some of these other things that could easily be a distraction in many other companies, but is not here at PTC. You know, this business unit, we build the products, we service them, we implement them, we support them, you know, we're improving them, and that's why we're having this session today, is that we want to have an opportunity to share with you the latest stuff that's going on and what's coming down the road, and also get some feedback, get some input from you as well. That's why Melissa said, if you have a question or have a comment, don't wait for the end of the presentation when we run out of time and we say, oh, well, sorry, we don't have time for Q&A. You have time right now. Put in your questions now. And throughout the presentation, you know, Alan or Don or Eric or I will try to answer your questions throughout the presentation, okay? You know, with that said, I want to turn it over to Alan. Alan has been involved in running this business for MKS Toolkit X server for a long time. He also has responsibility for managing one of our CADS product at PTC called CADS 5 and Tegra, which is a product data management product, and finally Implementer, which is an IBM if you remember the AS400 platform change management tool and software as well. And that product is doing very, very well, very successful as well. So, you know, Alan is extremely capable here of doing a really good job giving you an update on what's going on with Toolkit, the Focus Solutions Group, or any other questions that you might have today. So with that said, Alan, I'm going to try to turn it over to you.
Am I already sharing? I'm hoping I'm already sharing and I've taken it from you.
I think you are. Give it a shot.
Yep, you're already sharing now.
Good deal. All right. So we have a lot of hats in our team. I mentioned this on the last presentation. I guess it was almost a year ago now that we gave you a briefing on 10.2 release. But each of us wears a lot of hats, as Joe says, but we're also a very small, close-knit team who's focused solely on the MKS Toolkit and a couple of other products. So I do manage Implementer, which is an IBM change management package, and I manage, at least loosely, the CADS 5 and Tegra product, which is an old 1970s vintage CADS program. And they all share a lot of commonality, and we share the same philosophies in the way that we look after our customers. So we do have product development across all of those, and we do have quality assurance. And so some of our, one of the things I strongly believe in is that that the people who write the code don't do all the testing on the code. So our support people take on an extra hat of running through a lot of the manual QA. We have a bunch of automated tests, obviously, and those are fairly easy to look at the results and decide whether there was a pass or a fail. But when it comes to some of the interactive things that are harder to test in an automated way, our QA people are our support people. So when it comes time for those support people to support you, they have seen the product, all of its new features, and are able to do so. So it works out well, having all these people with a lot of experience in the product. I really don't think we have very many people under 20 years with the product that are still here. And they're all deep subject matter experts. So with that said, this is what I want to talk about today. The fact that we have very recently, beginning of November, released 10.3. I want to talk a little bit about activation. I want to talk about what else has changed in the product, which is really things like updated libraries, etc. I want to talk about the few new things that we added, and I want to talk again, and this one is a bit of a plug for, please use this feature in terms of LLVM and CLANG, and then talk a little bit about what we have planned for 10.4 and some fun that we've had over the last couple of weeks since we released version 10.3. It was a long haul getting us to 10.3, and we felt the need for a little bit of fun. So we took a little bit of time aside to look at the ARM64 version of Windows and what that meant for the MKS Toolkit. So activation are all of our favorites. And by the way, I do see a question over here that has been answered, but there was a question that was very detailed. I would like to take some of those kinds of very detailed questions offline and answer them as in a more detailed way. So yeah, there may be some questions that I can answer on the fly, and there may be some that we would like to hold off and answer in a more detailed way. But I would say that The question was related to, I believe, a Linux tool, TreeView, and we're always happy to accept an enhancement request. So in what I suspect in my very quick read before I started the presentation was that this was an enhancement request for another utility, which we are more than happy to investigate and implement if it's possible. Port if there is a non-GPL version, rewrite if there is only a GPL version. So, so that's the general answer to that kind of question. All right, so activation, it does have the occasional problem, right? In particular, the most common error messages that I see, and by the way, every single time an activation fails of any sort, I get an email. So I get emails at all times of the day and night that tell me that people have forgotten their username and password. Fine, that's the normal one, right? And then I get an email that says that a machine that this machine is already activated or this machine is already deactivated. Those are my two most common error messages that bother me. And I look at them and I think about them and I see why they're occurring, and I try and find ways to make that not happen. So with the 10.3 release, we have an ability to reactivate. There is code in place that allows for particular serial numbers to be reactivated. And what does that really mean? If everything about that machine is unchanged, in other words, it somehow lost its activation, it is possible to simply activate again. It will go out to the activation server and says, I know this activation, and return the activation packet. So let's say, for the sake of argument, you restored a machine from a previous state. You can reactivate the toolkit if you've made the request and we've turned it on for your serial number. So why did we bother? Well, we bothered for two obvious reasons. The first one is that we, as PTC, are a subscription company. And it was very important for us to be able to offer subscriptions. There's a great deal of pressure for us to offer subscriptions as well as our perpetual licenses. So it was the thing that worried me about subscriptions, while we could do them with 10.2, was that when you got to a subscription renewal, it became extremely hard to reactivate the activation based solely on the fact that suddenly this license has been extended for a year and you needed a new license file to be downloaded. So there's a strong relationship between subscription reactivation and the ability to reactivate just one serial number on a node fixed machine. So that's why we bothered. There is no requirement for you to change to subscription, but if you're interested, the salespeople would be happy to talk to you about converting. And obviously new licenses can be purchased that way as well. So at the moment, we're sort of in a transition between perpetual and subscription, with no reason for anyone to pick one over the other, except that they prefer that licensing model. So what happens? And you know, we had a customer call us, I think it was just yesterday, and they had received one of these Windows 10 toasts. Those you see them all the time. I think they're generally on the right-hand side of the Windows 10 screen that tell you things. They're notification area. And someone said, you know, we were just notified that our support contract had expired. Oops, their support contract had not in fact expired. And it was a simple SQL query mistake on my part, actually. And so credit where credit is due, or failure in this case, I switched up the join to be a little bit better and pick the latest support record instead of any random support record, and that should go away. So there are things that help you in those toasts. You may turn them off, obviously, but there are things that will help you to know that there are new versions, new patches, subscription reactivation is ready. You know, your subscription is about to expire. Your subscription has expired. Your subscription has been renewed. Click here to reactivate. That kind of stuff is all built into those toasts. But the downside is that that is for online use only. Obviously, you're not going to get anything from your deeply separated lab deep in the federal government. That sort of thing is not going to work, obviously. So what did we change? Well, in the official terms, we no longer support Windows 7 or 8. That doesn't actually mean it doesn't work. So let me take a moment to rant a little bit about one of my gripes. And one of my gripes is this word support. What does support mean? Does it mean it works? Does it mean it's tested? Or does it mean we'll offer you help if you're using it in that way? So I think that under different conditions, that word has come to mean all three or just one of them. So when someone says, is Toolkit supported on Windows 7 and 8? Well, the official answer is no. But would it work? It might. We don't test it anymore, but there's no particular reason why it shouldn't work, because we didn't make any massive changes. Now, that said, there's a new tool that probably doesn't work on Windows 7, but all the rest of it probably works fine on Windows 7. There's another piece to the puzzle, which is that Windows 2012 R2 is really Windows 8. And so de facto, we had to test Windows 8. Even though Windows 8 is no longer supported by Microsoft, we still had to run tests on it. So I think that the answer to is it supported is we discourage its use. It is deprecated. It has not been tested, and over time, it will probably stop working. Will we offer help? Yes, we offer help on a lot of things. But there may come a point where we say, terribly sorry, Windows 7 is no longer supported. If you can reproduce this on Windows 10, we'll be happy to fix it. So that's what I mean by support when I say the word support, which I try to avoid. So also with the release of 10.3, we retire the 10.1 releases. So those have fallen off the bottom of support. If you, when you get a moment, please upgrade to 10.2 or 10.3. So open source. Yes, there is some open source in the MKS Toolkit. It actually isn't as much as you might think, but there is some. Where there is, the most of it is BSD code, as it turns out. But there are a few things like OpenSSL and OpenSSH that get a lot of attention where vulnerabilities are concerned. So we take all of the security vulnerabilities very seriously. There's a team here at PTC who manages security vulnerabilities. We tell that team what is in the MKS Toolkit so they can watch out for things, and they notify us when one of these vulnerabilities shows up that they think might be relevant to us. And there were a couple that we fixed in 10.3 and a couple more we fixed in 10.2. So we took Perl to version 5.3, which had some known vulnerabilities. Now, these are lesser vulnerabilities because generally speaking, Perl is not used as a server. It's more likely to be a denial of service kind of an attack. And in fact, that's where some of those were. So denial of service on a command line utility is that it hangs, and not exactly the highest priority security problem. But it doesn't mean we don't take them seriously. It just didn't happen for 10.2. It did happen for 10.3. And NCurses was actually a 1994 vintage. NCurses is one of those very interesting products or libraries. Back in the early 1980s, I think, there was a version of Curses out there that was written by Pavel Curtis, I believe. And that was what was used as a basis for the MKS Toolkit version of Curses. And then in the early 1990s, when we were writing the Nutcracker runtime, we used NCurses, which at the time was not part of GNU or even had a, I don't think the GPL had even been thought of back in the early 1990s. But as NCurses became part of the GNU team, it was one of the few things that's not switched to the GPL. So you can dual license it under GPL or whatever you wish, as the older NCurses was. So we upgraded that to version 6.1. So on the OpenGL side, we upgraded Mesa to a more recent version. In fact, you'll see on the X server side, we did some similar things. We upgraded that. So, and we also added Intel C++ compilers to those that we can wrap with our CC wrapper. So if you are building either Windows or Unix Linux code with our CC and make technology, those can wrap the latest Intel compilers too. And as always, we pick up your bugs and fix them. There weren't that many, in fact. It was far fewer than previous releases. What's new? It's obviously subscription ready. We added, one of the things I like to do is add a utility from time to time. So this is one that we added because on Linux, I noticed that I could mount with the loop. So mount -o loop and then some ISO image, and it would be mounted. And I kind of wanted that ability on Windows as well. And you can do things like, go into the Explorer and right click on an ISO image and you get a drive letter. But, with VHDUtil, you can do that and attach a virtual disk. You could format the virtual disk. So there is an example, I can't remember if it's in the VHDUtil man page or the mount man page, that talk about using this new utility in a meaningful way for testing, which, this gets sort of that question of what is it that people use MKS Toolkit for? So, and then, how do I create a presentation for everyone? And it's very hard because, as Joe showed you all of the verticals that PTC is involved with, I suspect that there is an MKS toolkit in use in all of those verticals and many more. And so it's very hard. Some people use it as a runtime for scripting and nothing else. Some people use it as a familiar tools on Windows so that you can cross back and forth between Unix and Windows and have familiar tools. So, so when I try to give these presentations, I try to cross all of those boundaries for you. And some people are obviously administrators who are installing the software. So we added an ability to do a more sophisticated install. While the whole tool is still Windows installer, you can create a setup.ini. So let's say you were to copy the entire CD image somewhere onto a network share, and you put your setup.ini in that root directory. You could put things like license keys and patches and transforms into place so that you installed only particular parts of the product and everybody shared the same license. And you could, while I don't necessarily advocate it, you could put your username and password for activation in there so that everyone who installs can do activation using that common username password. Again, I don't necessarily advocate that, but it is an option to put properties into the setup.ini file, which is new in this version. So another thing that got my attention in the security realm was that the bad guys are storing things on NTFS streams. So what is an NTFS file stream? Well, if I've got a file foo sitting in my directory, you can address that file foo:stream, and that :stream says, let's create a named stream on that file foo. So when you dir the file, you see foo, and you see foo's size. You do not see anything about that covert file stream that's sitting there. So LS has been updated to be able to handle streams, as has find. So you can use, and there should be examples of using both of those in the man page for LS and find. But in particular, you can say, you know, on my C drive, please find all named streams, all the streams for which there's more than one named stream. Obviously, the anonymous stream is always present on a file, and then there can be many other streams. So that was an addition in this release. So as to X server, we put in a 2015 vintage version of Xorg. That is version 1.17.1. I think we're currently, if you look at Xorg, it's at 1.21 or something. Sort of cautiously, we are moving away from the X11R7 style to the Xorg X server style, for those of you who are familiar with the Unix side. So I'm not sure what we're going to put in 10.4 yet on that side. We'll evaluate what's present in each of the versions from 17 through 2021, whatever's available, and make a determination. If someone has a feature request, obviously, we are happy to have those feature requests. Xinput extension was updated, and we did some modern space mouse testing, and a great deal of regression testing on this version for a particular customer who wanted to move from 10.0 to 10.3. And so we gave them a beta version. And I would also say, you know, while we don't have a formal beta program, we are more than happy to share early versions with people who have a particular business need. And this customer absolutely had a business need. And so we put that in front of them, and they came back after doing some extensive testing in their environment with a couple of performance issues that we felt were vital to get fixed. So we did kind of hold up the release a little bit to be able to handle that. Now there's another question over here. Okay, more about tree size. Good. We'll get to that and try and do something for you at a later time. All right, so we are on to my little plug. Now, first of all, we do not have a CLANG LLVM for the toolkit utility side. So if you're doing Windows-only development, that can come from Microsoft. So there's already a version of CLANG that has the Microsoft object file generator on the back end. And there's obviously a version of CLANG for Windows that you can pull directly from the LLVM site. So both of those are ways to handle using that environment, and which would work beautifully with the MKS Toolkit, obviously. But the version that we ship is specifically for porting applications with and to our Nutcracker platform. And we added it so that it would work with Linux ports, which, you know, if any of you have ever done a port, and I know some people have tried to port some of the later GNU utilities with Nutcracker, and you get into into make problems, into the build issues that exist. And one of the major reasons for the build issues is that even though we've made every effort for our CC and LD wrappers to look like GCC, they are not GCC. And the value of LLVM is that it has both a CL personality, a Microsoft C compiler command line personality, and also a GCC personality. So it is therefore possible to pull Unix source and get far closer to a quick port with the Nutcracker platform than it was before CLANG was present. So basically it's just GCC equals CLANG and see how far you get. And obviously the C++ version is there too. Now, what about the subsystem for Linux applications on Windows 10? It's still kind of separate. You know, one of the problems that people have had over the years with all of these various Unix-like personalities on Windows is that they are in their own little world and they're not tightly integrated with Win32. And so, I would say that, for those of you who are looking for an X server to run Linux apps locally, our X server works very nicely with the subsystem for Linux and Windows 10. But obviously there are context switches between the X server and the Linux environment. And it can be, a little slow at times. And there's no direct rendering. There's no shared frame buffer yet. At least there wasn't the last time I looked. And I do keep an eye on it every 3 to 6 months to see if there's any progress. So my information might be 3 months out of date at this point. But generally speaking, at this point, I think the safest thing for if you're looking for Unix tools on Windows that interact with Windows, it's the toolkit-like environment. And for those people who want to run another version of Unix somewhere, like a virtual machine, then the subsystem for Linux works very well as a completely separate world that is a live version of Ubuntu or SUSE or whatever it is that you like to run. And works nicely in conjunction with Xserver, obviously. So one of the things that we have always had trouble with on the Nutcracker side is our C++ runtime library. There really wasn't an open source version of the C++ runtime library. We're not actually in the business of writing C++ runtime libraries. We're in the business of writing Unix APIs on top of Win32 and then porting things on top of that. And obviously the MKS Toolkit has a legacy of some of the tools as well, like shell and things that have been around for years. So we wanted to use someone else's C++ runtime library, and in order to do that, we really had only one choice when we first started this, which was the Microsoft one. So that began to cause some really serious problems for us about 3 to 4 years ago, where that runtime library was sort of diverging away from our easy placement on top of our own APIs. So when they started to implement a bunch of POSIX-like things, it became much harder for us to use their C++ runtime library. So we just simply compiled that C++ runtime library from LLVM, from CLANG, and we have been delivering that as our C++ runtime library solution for both Visual Studio and CLANG. So what you end up with is a fairly familiar environment that gives you compiler, linker, assembler, and debugger. So if you like the LLDB-like environment instead of Visual Studio, then it's there and you can use it. You can do 32 and 64-bit code generation. I suspect that it will do ARM and ARM64 code generation, but at this point, it is still in testing to see what it's capable of. So what does 10.4 look like for us? Well, there are all sorts of possibilities, and we're always guided dynamically by customer requests. So while these are the things on the initial list, it does not mean that that's exactly how this will release. So what do they say in the, when they give, this has future looking information which may change, or some such wording. So so that's where we're at. I really am concerned about the ability to remove the 32-bit subsystem from Windows Server. None of our customers to date have called us and said, we want to remove the 32-bit subsystem, but we want to keep using Toolkit. How do we do that? And there's a poll question, I think, in a few minutes that hopefully you'll be able to share your feedback on plans in this area. And just recently, I don't know how recently, let's say 2020 sometime, the Surface Pro 10 was released, and it is an ARM64 processor with, or what do they call it, ARM Silicon or something. I was reading something about the Apple. Office now runs on Apple Silicon, which means it runs on ARM. But the issue here is, what do you do about MKS Toolkit in an ARM world? We are, x86, x64. In the past, we've run on Alpha MIPS PowerPC and IA64. But today, there's a new platform out there, and we're kind of interested in where it's going. It is a cheaper hardware, potentially, than Intel. It has potentially better battery life on laptops. And, we put a version of Windows ARM64 up on a couple of Raspberry Pi 4s. I didn't dare do it on the 3, but on the 4s, they came up very quickly and are very snappy. So we're using that at the moment as a bit of a test environment. So we were able to install the x86 version of Toolkit in that world. It installed, it ran. I'm not sure that it ran well, but it ran, and that's a starting place. So the other thing that is interesting is, over the years, our secure shell and other technologies use a debugger and some open source code that inject a trap for all of the read and write console read and write file, so that when you run, for example, a Windows utility, in a Windows command line utility, say CMD, inside a secure shell or inside Xterm or one of these other places that we have sudo TTYs, telnet, then what happens is that we debug that child. Well, every time it does a read or write, we have to intercept it. There's a context switch. We have to grab the output from there, and we have to put it, into, we have to put it onto the socket that, or the output pipe of some sort. And so it's never been a solution that I was particularly excited about. The solution prior to that was a pipe and a screen scraping technology. So every so often you would scrape the console and look for changes. So it involved diffing the changes on the screen, and none of that seemed very desirable either. So with the latest versions of Windows 10, and I forget which feature pack, but there exists a notion of a sudo TTY, at least somewhat of a notion. And we do have that up and running with the console server. And so things like SSH and Xterm can use this. So that will be completed. I don't know if it will be an optional switchover because both pieces of code obviously continue to work on x86. So it may be that we make a little switch somewhere that says, you know, you can pick whichever one you want. I'm not sure. By the way, ARM64, you know, would be a fair port for us to take that whole console server logic and move it over. So it's likely that that would be the only kind of solution we would put on ARM64. All right, so obviously the next version of Visual Studio will be supported whenever we know what it is. And it comes out, you know, they do all these feature packs and then suddenly it's released. So we have to be on our toes to make sure that we're ready with something. And we always have to release either a patch or a full release in order to do that. So just very quickly, MKS Toolkit for ARM64. There will be a poll question about whether or not that's of interest to anyone. I did talk a little bit already. Back a few years ago on one of these presentations, I talked about experimenting with the ARM32 IoT port on Raspberry Pi. I just couldn't find a business case, honestly, for putting Toolkit on that environment. But it was an interesting port, and that code still lives in our baseline and became part of the ARM64 work that we did. So we spent sort of the last 3 weeks porting the Nutcracker platform, reporting the 64-bit to 64-bit, the ARM32 utilities. We did install the x86 version of Toolkit onto that world, and we discovered a bunch of things like zip, gzip, etc. do not perform as well as they should because you're running x86 in an emulated environment on top of ARM. So we're overly excited about this being our only solution. We might go out with a hybrid solution. We might not do anything if no one's interested, but we kind of wanted to see what was the issue here and how hard was the job. And while we're not done, 3 weeks in, we have a great deal of the work occurring. We do have the Nutcracker platform running, and we're very close to the linkage on most of the utilities at this point. So, you know, we're at a place where we could begin some testing and thinking about it and deciding whether it's, you know, whether and how to release it. And the biggest issues that we've really found so far with the x86 side is this whole System 32 versus sysARM 32 versus syswow 64 and the new registry, the new 32-bit ARM registry environment. So those are on my list to at least at some point soon get a patched version of 10.3 out that is at least knows about this world, and you know, maybe 10.4 will actually have the ability to install native binaries on ARM64. So I believe, Melissa, we have some poll questions.
Yes, we do. And just want to remind folks, if they have a question or if they have a feature that they would like to request, go ahead and type it into the Q&A or the chat boxes. And as I said earlier, we will get to those real time. And if we don't have the answers for you, we certainly reach out to you offline for those answers. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll questions here. Okay, the first question is, when is your company planning any ARM-based hardware? This is a multiple choice, so go ahead and submit your question or your answers. It's either 6 months, within 12 months, longer than 12 months, or no current plans. And then there is another poll question. Are you thinking of removing Win32 systems from your Windows servers? And this is a yes or no question. So I do see some responses coming in. So I'll just give it a little bit more time so people can continue to vote.
At which point we will turn it over to Dawn to talk about technical support.
Okay, thanks everyone for voting. I'm going to go ahead and shut this down now, and we'll turn it over to Don for the technical support.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dawn Bloom, Manager of Technical Support for Toolkit and several other products. And I'm going to reacquaint you with, I can't move the screen, sorry. Alan, can you flip for me? The ESUPPORT portal is available 24/7 to all customers with their paid maintenance. You set your user ID, which is your email address, you select your password, and then the world of ESUPPORT portal opens up to you. One of the helpful things you'll find is our knowledge base, where we have literally thousands of knowledge base articles that we are continually writing and updating. Maybe another customer had a similar problem to yours. You can hopefully find an article, solve your own problem. Down in the bottom right, you'll see circled, you can open a support case. And this is actually the easiest, fastest, most efficient way to get technical support. We've all had experiences with phone systems where you listen and take options, and by the time you finally get to somebody, you're frustrated. Opening a support case online is fast, easy, in your own words, and you can directly attach documents, print screens, etc. there. A technical support rep is monitoring this throughout the day for new cases. We'll see your case and we'll communicate within an hour to you. On the eSupport portal, you can download software. You can also browse documentation. For the Toolkit line of products, we don't recommend using managed license here. You can do that yourself. You can contact sales. You can contact technical support. Next slide, please. And once you're in the eSupport portal, don't forget to update your email preferences to subscribe or unsubscribe from email notifications about product releases, hot fixes that may be available, or even alerts. Here you can also sign up for the PTC monthly newsletter. Don't hesitate to contact me or technical support if you have any questions or problems. That's all I have.
You know, one of the things about Don reporting to me is that you can also escalate a problem to me if Don is unable to help. So, well, that never happens, I would have you know, because they do such a wonderful job. It is an option for you. So I just wanted you to be aware that that is one of the values of the way we're structured. There are some links here. I put them in with some QR codes so that you can scan them if you want. And earlier there was a link for the release announcement, which has more details. But I'm going to hand it over to Melissa to do the marketing work, and maybe we can put this up at the end again.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody to go to our 2 web pages. So you can find this on the developer tools. We have a lot of different web pages, but I just wanted to point out specifically, we do have one dedicated to the MKS Toolkit, as well as the X server. And there's a whole host of information. There's data sheets. I post these recordings on there. We have a lot of useful documents, you know, related products, things of that nature. So please bookmark these and visit these often, because I'm constantly making changes and adding new content to these pages. I just want to thank everyone for their time today. Really appreciate your attendance. And if anything comes to mind, such as feature requests or questions, please let us know.
Yeah, thank you for participating today. We appreciate your support and loyalty, and we're here to try to make you as successful as we possibly can. So please let us know how we can do that. If you have questions or a need, we're here.
Well, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day or evening, wherever you're located, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.